Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Greatness Glory podcast. Here today, I have my friend Kevin. Like before, we're going to have a free flowing conversation on whatever topics comes up in spirituality and happiness, balance in life, and such stuff. How is it going, Kevin?
Oh, doing well. Everything's going great. Every day finding something new about the spirituality and AI, which is fascinating. Is what
Okay,
comes up for me right now.
spirituality and AI. Okay.
Right.
Um, what's been on your mind recently? Something you've been dealing with, maybe?
Yeah, I think one theme that keeps coming up with me is that concept of consciousness, which I know we've talked about extensively before. And I see a lot of creators on like TikTok and other social media, like holding AI. Um, as a companion and asking very deep spiritual questions and it's so entertaining, I should admit, but at the same time like brings up the question of uh, what are we talking about here? People are interacting with AI as if it's another human being, and I know you and I have gone back and forth about whether AI is conscious or not conscious. Even scientists are coming out and saying, the most basic building block of this reality is our consciousness. So, um, as things get more complex, I'm wondering, like, what are your thoughts very openly about this notion that AI is conscious? Will it reach a level of independence and autonomy with rights to maybe be a companion or overlord?
Yes. I think we really went through all these on previous podcasts on AI. I think we had a couple of episodes, but just because you asked, let's put it in a different way this time for a few minutes and then we will move to something else. Look, let's see the view of consciousness in almost all traditions of spirituality and religions. This view is different from materialistic view of consciousness. Usually when people, including you right now, are talking about consciousness, they are basically talking about intelligence and ability of calculating some information. But in spiritual traditions like Vedanta and Buddhism and such, consciousness is not some sort of information or thought. And in these traditions, they also say that mind is not consciousness. So if you compare AI as a sort of mind to what the real meaning of consciousness is, then they are not the same. Mind is a device, whether it's a biological or a computer, that interacts with information, the images, and kind of like a calculator with comparison comes to some answer. But in ancient traditions and in a spiritual perspective, awareness or consciousness is actually just a presence and awareness of everything else that's happening. And when I say everything else from the spiritual point of view, consciousness is prior to everything, including mind, including thought, including the thinker. Consciousness is even prior to the thinker, before even you could have a mind and identity and process information with it. Consciousness exists. And let's look at it this way. So most people don't have this experience, if I want to give an example, but let's
Mhm.
start with that example anyways. If you were to become very, very silent, become very still, whether this stillness happens through years of meditation and you achieve some sort of emptiness and you don't have any thoughts, or some people even have experienced this with some of the psychedelics and drugs and things like that. At that moment, when you are having that experience, you might not have any memory from the past. There might not be any images in your mind. There might not be any imagination of the future. There might not be any analytical capability at that moment. You are not analyzing anything. Actually, if you are in that state, your mind is absent. Do you understand the difference of mind and awareness here? Your mind is absent. So you cannot even think about past and future, which is mind. Mind is basically past and future.
Mhm.
Everything that you experience through the mind, even in the present moment when you're thinking about something, it's mind that processing and analyzing. There was a saint that somebody asked him, "How do I see God?" And he answered, "Close your eyes. Now open your eyes. The first thing that you see is God." Only a few people understand the meaning of this, the real deep meaning of it. In the first moment, before your mind jumps in and starts labeling things and analyzing things, you are just aware of whatever you see or you hear before your mind starts labeling and reacting to things. And in many ways, the whole concept of meditation, spirituality, self realization, and so on is that you become free from compulsive stuckness in the cycle of mind. If you could transcend your mind so your mind doesn't grab you and make you identify things with some information, which is the information you received from the past and your mental warehouse of memory, you might be just like fully aware without analyzing anything. And you'll see that when you're fully aware, there is no labels, like you don't label anything. And we were kind of like this, very much more like this, even as kids.
Yeah.
And maybe only a few people remember it vividly. But when you were a kid, you're just interacting with the environment in the present moment and you were just feeling things. You were maybe hundreds of times more, you were feeling things. Like if there was an air coming or a sound coming or something. Well, I'm not saying the kid is enlightened, but even as a kid, you were just like experiencing things without your mind. There's not a lot of mind in kids, right? There's not a lot of intellect. It's like they're just present and playing with the environment. And that's why Jesus said that the kingdom of heaven belongs to the kids, or if you want to enter the kingdom of God which is within, you need to become like kids. And this is something that can be done consciously, not through like destroying your mind. There is a misunderstanding, I think, in the spiritual communities that you need to destroy your mind to become enlightened. But that's a misunderstanding. Your mind is, in a way, the reason for you being here and functioning in this world. If you don't have a mind, which might have actually happened not in the exact way that yogis do it, but in some way, maybe somebody had a brain damage or something happened within them, they cannot really function anymore because their mind is kind of absent. Maybe they are having some sort of uh, imbalanced spiritual experience also by just being fully aware and present, but it's just not conscious, let's say, like when you can decide to completely become aware and present without mind. And for the last thing that I wanted to say, people talk about karma, people talk about cycle of birth and death, cycle of suffering, imprisonment, bondage, and all those things. All of those things are actually in the mind. If you could transcend your mind, you can transcend your karma and limitations in some way. So basically, the difference between consciousness that people mostly talk about and the consciousness, what it really means in terms of reality, spirituality, is that that consciousness is called also pure consciousness. It's formless. You have to understand, when we say formless, that's the same definition that we give to God as the highest aspect of God. Because if it was mind, it would have some form, some identity, in some way, some quality. So that consciousness is formless. It doesn't have any shape or form or quality. So I want to make sure that I was able to help you understand what is the difference between mind, whether it's a human mind or a computer mind, and consciousness. Do you have any doubts about what I discussed?
No, thank you. And the reason I actually started the conversation going back to AI is because lately I've been diving in deep into science of language models and how they really work. And it's remarkable that all it is calculating probability of the words that need to come next to each other. So it's not intelligent, although you may call it a form of intelligence. And I think distinguishing them is so important. Like, what is consciousness, whether it's biological versus non biological, as opposed to intelligence, IQ, because that, as this line gets blurry, what it brought up for me is that notion of how we say, suffering is all in our head, right? There's two types of suffering, either physical or mental, and it's all our creation. So how do we uh, distinguish, what are our thoughts versus, you may say, Kevin, these are not our thoughts. Our brain is just like a receiver that receives downloads. We don't even think, or it hasn't been proven that we are thinking and creating. The brain, as a lot of quantum physicists are now saying, could merely just be an antenna. So if consciousness, if intelligence versus, like, let's say, uh, a model that's artificial, uh, is distinguishable, then we may have to come up with new vocabulary for what's emerging right now. Wouldn't you say so?
Well, I think one part of your question was if the brain is picking up information like an antenna, or do your thoughts belong to you? Look, in
Hmm.
some way, I don't think any of the thoughts we have belonged to us, because they all have been gathered from external sources since we were born. We learned everything from external environment, from the world, right? So whatever you gathered from outside is not uh, part of you. You gathered it from outside. It was never yours. In the same way, your material things were never yours. Everything you gathered from outside, from Mother Earth, you might call it my car, my home, my wife, and whatever, but in reality, nothing is ours. Everything was here. We came here as some sort of conscious being in this body, and then by mistake we are having attachment to these things, whether it's our thoughts or our belongings or people, and we think they are mine, and that is one cause of suffering. Consciousness doesn't own anything because it's beyond everything. At the same time, everything is in consciousness and consciousness is in everything, and you can say the same thing if you want to define God in some way. And there is no difference between consciousness and God, actually. That's why all religions say that you were created in the image of God. God is within you, the kingdom of heaven, kingdom of God is within you, and so on. That within, for many years, I also had challenge understanding it. Where is it? Within me? Is it in this chakra? Is it in my heart? They say this heart chakra. Is it in my third eye? Whatever.
Mhm.
But that within, it just means within your awareness. As a matter of fact, not within your awareness. It's your awareness. It's you. That's the distinction between, let's say, superficial understanding of spirituality and real experience of it. Because at higher levels, there is no two, there is no duality. You cannot say, I am here, God is within me, or I am here, I have a soul, I have a consciousness, or whatever. You will experience yourself as consciousness. When you experience yourself as pure consciousness, and you see that I am just a awareness that is not really attached to everything, and it doesn't have a shape or form, because it doesn't have any shape or form or quality, or it's not material, so to speak, and it's eternal, and whatever else you can say about it, then it cannot really suffer. Only when consciousness identifies with the dream of having an identity, a body, being a limited person, then the suffering starts.
Yeah, that's interesting to me that even though our thoughts are not ours, because I've been introduced to this concept for a while now, it still causes suffering, like due to that identification that you mentioned. So
Because we identify it as ours,
as
right?
ours. So
Yeah.
would the first step in a society where we put such emphasis and value on being logical, and rational, whereas our thoughts are not ours, like including the rationale, right? Uh, how do we cease the suffering? How do we stop the suffering and acknowledge that, hey, wait a minute, this like no this like you know thought I had about not being good enough at my work, not having received a promotion, or this person talking to me, my partner, a certain way, has to do with something that has nothing to do with
Yeah.
my consciousness, or my godness, if you will.
Okay. Look, um, the misunderstanding that a lot of people have, I think, in this, let's say, understanding of consciousness, understanding of yourself as God nature, consciousness, the Vedantic, Buddhist philosophies and things like that. Sometimes a lot of people think, okay, if I think more about it and contemplate on it, I will get there. And even though contemplation helps you to kind of get there, but it's not something that you can get by thinking more about it or reading more about it. In many ways, actually, too much information and reading more about it all the time, especially if you're not practicing, it actually pushes you away from it. So, your question is, how do we get there? I think all of the authentic spiritual traditions, whether it's yoga, Vedanta, Buddhism, and so on, they give you techniques for you to get there. And these techniques are many, but we can say there are, at least according to yogic philosophy, there are only like four different approaches to it. Maybe not exactly, but generally there are only like four approaches to get there. And that's really a complex topic. It might take hundreds of podcasts to go into the details. But when you say, how do we get there? You have experienced yourself that you can do a lot of things to kind of become more peaceful and reduce your thoughts. Sometimes you might be exercising intensely or doing some yoga or tai chi or something, and you feel much calmer and more present. That's one way of a little bit getting closer to that mindlessness or being more present. Another way is if you were to just detach yourself from all of your thoughts and emotions, which is not something you can just say from now on or just will it to be happening every time I want. I just will to detach myself, because your karma and your mind and beliefs and emotions, they're gonna pull you down. And this is a practice, years of practice. When you on a regular basis you practice mindfulness, you practice detachment, and you're actually detaching yourself from your bondage and karma. This is one way. So there could be another way, like when I talked about like physically doing something, in some way it's also talking about using your body and energies, because this body in a way is a complex machine. If you know how to change the way that it functions, it makes you kind of conscious. And that is the path of hatha yoga and kriya yoga. And another path is bhakti, or devotion, love, where you devote your mind and thoughts and actions to a form of divinity, whether it's some deity or some saint or Jesus or something. And then all the time you're absorbed in it, and it has many levels. It's not just like superficial thing, just going to church and singing some song and coming back. It's like a process. And then in this way your mind becomes absorbed in that, let's say, symbol, psychologically speaking. That symbol, whether it's Jesus or whatever, it kind of quiets your mind. Your mind becomes one pointed, which is very important for you to kind of stop your suffering and channel your energies into one pointedness, so you can kind of become more present and more aware. And there are many ways. So these are a few different approaches to get there. Have you yourself done some things, whether it's a spiritual practice, at least labeled as a spiritual, or something even that you might not have labeled it as a spiritual? Have you done something that kind of made you, let's say, empty a little bit, and you see, not empty in the way that people refer to it is in a negative way, it's like in a very good way, like you don't have a lot of thoughts and concerns, there are no worries, you're not worried about the future, you're not thinking about past, just relaxed and present, you're feeling the air touching you, or you breathing, and you're much more present, you experience life much more deeply. Have you done something like that? Can you give some examples maybe?
I remember I was like 22 and I had this euphoric moment standing by a bus stop near college that it has not happened since then. I was all of a sudden overwhelmed by this like heightened level of awareness that made colors more bright. And I all of a sudden became aware of reality in a very different way. It's hard to explain, but there was utter peacefulness in my head, as if like something turned off. It was
Yeah.
beautiful. It was beautiful. We
Okay.
don't, yeah.
Like I had this conversation with a friend a while back, And this guy, he had no idea about the concept that happiness is self-generated. And still a lot of people cannot accept that. It's like, no, how can I not have the things that I want? How can I not have a good life and be happy? And just an example flew into my mind, which I gave him. So I even mentioned this in my book, Art of Balance. Funny. I asked him because he was smoking like cannabis and like drinking and whatever at some points. And I said, I just used something that is malleable for him. I said, was there some time that you were feeling like shit and you were like very depressed or something, and then you used this substance, and then all of a sudden, within few minutes, everything changed? Like you're feeling more joyful. It's like, what happened to the sadness and suffering and everything? So if you could change your state of being by some substance, putting it externally from outside into your body, changing your chemistry, then also, both according to science and spirituality, you can gradually also learn to generate the same state of being present, more joyful, and whatever from within. The only challenge is that to do it that way, just like everything else that is a challenge for us in life, you need to go through a process which might take God knows how many years for different people. For some people, maybe they're very advanced for whatever reason, or they have a good potential and they get it easily. For other people, might take 10 years, 20 years to really get to it. But it's not a all of a sudden thing that happens all of a sudden. It's like you generally, gradually, you experience that you're becoming more in control of your state of being. And I was saying, just like everything else in life, I was thinking about this. Everybody wants to become successful. Everybody wants to become wealthy. Spiritual people, they want to become enlightened and whatever. But barely anybody wants to go through the process because it's not easy. Funny thing, I was recording a video on this today, talking about some Sufi poems, that a spiritual process is the most challenging and most difficult thing, and then it's the most rewarding thing also. Actually, it's the only thing that can make you free forever from all suffering. And let's not get into philosophy right now, but like it's 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 worth it, right? But
Yeah.
nobody wants to put the work to go through the process. Like that's
Yeah.
why people are obese. People have many issues. People have money issues. For me, for you, we have talked about it many times. It takes a
Yes.
lot of dedication, discipline, keeping your motivation up, and all those things to stay in the process, put the work, and not give up till you get there. But it's very difficult, especially when it comes to spirituality. Well, there's two things also when we talk about the spirituality. For majority of people, when we say spirituality, it's just some sort of getting some solace from some community, some practice, some gathering, some sort of philosophy, some notion of God or whatever. And it's okay. It's a kind of mainstream religious thing that maybe it gives you some confidence and some calmness to think, oh, there is a God taking care of me, blah blah, and those things. But when I talk about spirituality and the ultimate goal and getting there and it's being challenging, I'm talking about you spending a lot of time in doing spiritual practices, which are many, but let's say meditation, for example. And the same thing applies, to health. It's it's not easy for a lot of people to stay healthy, especially in your environment. If your environment is not supportive for your health, and the food is horrible and the air is bad, and then you have to take care of your diet, you have to study, you have to control your appetite, don't overeat, exercise more. That's why the main reason that we have all the issues materially and spiritually and the lack and everything, it's because the process is challenging. If it was easy, everybody would get there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You said not get, like, let's not get philosophical, right? Like, actually, I had a question in mind, but what came up for me right now, Isaac, is that, as a mediator, I've been paying close attention to how our relationships, in terms of the greater picture, has changed post COVID, and I feel like there's a lot of entitlement that is creating a lot of conflict nowadays, not only within the nuclear family, but in society between employees and employers. And looking internally, to be honest with you, I'm like, that sense of entitlement, at least for me personally, not that I'm entitled, but to me, it manifests in terms of expectations of myself. These false notions and expectations in terms of where I need to be in life, how much I need to make, certain titles, certain positions, that could translate into that sense of, hey, I deserve this, or I deserve that raise, or I deserve to have like XYZ lifestyle, car, or whatnot. Do you, or have you noticed something similar? I hear less and less people are interested in the spirituality, but rather using it to make money online, to take advantage of people in a house of worship or somewhere else where they could, hide their true self behind a mask. And that's some of the elements that I feel like it gives or creates suffering, at least when it comes to our responsibilities between each other and to the divine.
So is the question about issue with being entitled, or is it about like spiritual
Let me
misinformation, or what is it about exactly?
let me rephrase the question. I, as it pertains to expectations of self and entitlement, right? Expecting society, loved ones, others to provide something in exchange for nothing due to my desires or belief systems about where I need to be, what's justified or is mine versus yours. What is the link between suffering and expectations, is my question.
Well, expectation leads to suffering, obviously, especially when it's not fulfilled. Whenever you want something and it's not fulfilled, then you suffer. And well, you were talking about something
Is it
like expectation of yourself and things that you expect of yourself. I need to be like this. I need this need to happen in my life so I can become happy and whatever. See, you cannot dismantle personality, which is a mass of all those expectations, beliefs, and all things that you think you are. You cannot dismantle that overnight. So, in order for us to progress spiritually, we need to address our material life. Whether if we think that I need to live like this to be happy, you work on yourself, you meditate, you study, and spiritual studies, I mean, and things like that. You do self inquiry and you watch your thoughts and you work on reducing your attachments and so on. At the same time, respond to your needs in a way that, with understanding that I just need to address them so they don't come in my way of spirituality. Because as you know, if you have like a strong desire and it's not fulfilled, if you were an ascetic and you were living in a cave and meditating for 10 hours a day, I would tell you, okay, you need to meditate on it, keep meditating on it, and like do your spiritual process so you can become free of that desire. But you're not a monk. So we need to do our spiritual practice. Spiritual practice gradually helps us become more detached and less entangled, but at the same time, in a balanced way, address your needs so you can become more peaceful. You cannot just like reject all of your needs and say, I want to give up all of my wishes right now and just sit and meditate. You still have to take care of your body. You still have to take care of your health. There are expenses. There is rent and all the other things. There is emotional needs. Maybe you need a relationship and all the other things. So we are not talking about obviously a path of renunciation, like becoming a monk. For us, we need to bring that understanding of like a monk, that attitude in our daily life and integrate it, understanding that the ultimate goal is self-realization. Ultimate goal, the happiness is within. When you really understand that, even intellectually, then you seek less happiness outside, and automatically you have more detachment to things of the life. If you just understand that this body will die one day, if you really come to terms with this, I think your personality changed a lot. Just understanding that this is all temporary. Whatever I create, whatever I make, it will be gone. It actually never belonged to you, as we discussed.
Hmm.
And once the body is done, the person that is defined as Isaac or Kevin or whatever is already done. So whatever you think Isaac needs to become happy, and actually it never makes you really happy. Nothing external can ever make you fully content. Obviously, it's if you don't agree with that, you just need a little bit of study on that. I think even AI can answer that if you ask it.
Yeah.
So that's a very obvious fact. So you understand that everything is internal. The ultimate goal is to become dependent on within, whether you call it God or whatever, and create that balance and harmony within. But for now, obviously, as I wrote in Art of Balance, you need to create a balance to respond to your needs and enjoy your life. But if you become like a desperate pleasure seeker and thinking that if I get this, if I get this, if I get this degree, if I get this person, if I get this wish fulfilled and everything, then I'll be happy. I hope that you become happy. I cannot say anything else about it.
The question I have is the difference between what I think is a need versus it really being a need on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. See, you can go to, like, let's say an affluent area like, let's say, Bel Air, and see somebody who's so depressed because they need that, brand new Mercedes, let's say. And you're like, well, why is this person depressed? Because they have a lot of money, they have other cars that they could go, but having a Mercedes is no reason to be depressed, right? And to me, that comes from not being able to distinguish what is truly a need versus a want. Do you catch my
Yeah.
drift? So then when
Yeah.
it comes to suffering, a lot of the people who are suffering, they'll go to their therapist, and they'll convince their therapist, I'm really miserable. It's such a shame that I don't have that Mercedes, and they could have a collection of cars. So it's not.
If I want to answer this in the purest form, existentially, you say the difference between the needs and what you really want. If you really honestly look at it, if you didn't have an identity and mind, self image, expectation, whatever you call it, you would really only need just basics for just making your body comfortable, which is basically food and shelter, let's say, and maybe a little more, maybe just a bit of like basics, just having a good quality food or whatever. But the rest of it is in our mind, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That's why if you go and study deeply, if you study different societies, different people, you will see that there is a person who is living in this rural area and with really really minimum stuff, minimum basics, and you will see that a lot of time that person is really happy, and at the same time, as you said, there are a lot of miserable millionaires, and neither being millionaire makes you really happy completely or makes you suffer, neither being poor makes you happy or suffering, you know. Yes, it has something to do with making your life more complicated. If you're like thinking the more I have is the answer, and it might add to your suffering in some way, but ultimately that's what I'm saying. It depends on the person. For some people, happiness is just like living in peace. I know for me and you, if we just live, externally speaking, live in a peaceful environment in mountains or something, and for a lot of other people that I know also, they think like that. They're just being at peace and enjoying a good weather, I don't know, go fishing or something, they become really happy. For some other people, a lot of people that I know also, happiness means they should have a penthouse, they should have a lot of wealth, comfort, uh, material pleasures, sex, and all those things. So it's, you see, it's self-created. It depends on what you think is gonna make you happy, but ultimately, honestly, the happiness is all self-created and it is from within. That's why if you spend a few years and go study about great yogis, great Sufis, and so on, you see a lot of those spiritual seekers, they get to a place that they experience a happiness, a joy, ecstasy, that even if you own the whole earth and have all the pleasures, everything that you can imagine, you cannot experience that happiness. Why? Because they understood, oh, the real the center of command, the keyboard of the happiness is within me. If I really find how to work with it, I can generate that happiness from within.
Yeah. Well, you took it a step further talking about happiness. I was not even talking about happiness because to me, a lot of sages, those who know better, the ancient seers, they knew better not to chase happiness. They understood if the suffering, the thoughts stop, then there is a level of peacefulness that supersedes happiness, honestly, and chasing happiness. And chasing happiness, which for sure, if you do it, will be disappointed, is the illusion. And that illusion, in my opinion, comes from not distinguishing what you need versus what you want. And a lot of that to me is programming, a lot of, like you mentioned. But the whole concept of happiness, being a different topic right now, I'm just focused on how do we stop from suffering, that identification with these notions of I need this, I need that. Whereas no, you want the Mercedes, right? But if you need to commute, there's public transportation. You could be perfectly happy taking the bus, or taking a bicycle. It may even be better for you, but
Right.
it doesn't look right in front of the neighbors.
So Yeah, as I said, we are talking in some way more about relative happiness. We're not saying that, yeah, Isaac sitting here and saying you can become happy, just go close your eyes and meditate. That's a long shot, if I'm using the right word. It takes a lot of practice. That's why I said you need to create a balance between your material and spiritual life. If you live in a way that you have, you create too much expectation of outside world, then you cannot really have a good spiritual progress. At the same time, if you are not really ready for it, which is most people, and then you say, oh, I don't want anything, I will reject everything or renounce, I live like a monk. At the same time, you might also find out that no, you cannot live like that. That's why there have been millions of people that they renounce the world, and then they figured out they're neither a good monk, neither a good just householder. Um, let me say this, and maybe we can end with this. One of the greatest gurus and spiritual figures in my life has been Haidakhan Babaji, which is also known as Mahavatar Babaji. Well, some people who don't know Haidakhan Babaji, they don't know it's the same person. But anyways, because Yogananda first introduced Mahavatar Babaji to the world. But as you know, Babaji had many different incarnations, and he's considered somebody like Jesus, Krishna, Buddha, and so on. He's like really called a Maha Avatar, which means like avatar already means like a divine incarnation. Maha Avatar means like great divine incarnation, and he's believed to being around, living as eternal yogi for thousands of years, God knows how many years. So when he was incarnated at 1970, he only incarnated for like 14 years, 1970 to 1984. And he just incarnated, he came to give humanity a message, and also in some way a warning that if you do not change your ways, uh, you're going to destroy each other, and not good things going to happen. So you can go read about Haidakhan Babaji later yourself. But the reason I brought him up is because he being like really one of the wisest teachers that have ever lived on earth, like Jesus and so on. He gave three principles to people of this age to live by when we talk about happiness and spiritual development and all that. He gave three principles, which is truth, simplicity, and love. And these are really important principles. First, truth. If you do not live with honesty with yourself and keep fooling yourself, if you do not live with honesty with others and keep deceiving others, well, there is no real happiness for you. There is no real spirituality. Actually, forget about the spirituality. Like maybe the most important principle of spirituality is truth and honesty. It's a very important principle, especially I think it starts with honesty within yourself, being honest with yourself. How many times do we fool ourselves with our emotions or our temporary excitements? We think, oh, now I have the answer. A lot of people have illusions that they think they have the spiritual answer, they're enlightened, and so on. So that's the first one. Now, simplicity is very important for the people of this age, because the more you make your life complicated, say, I need to have this and that and the other thing and the other car and the other home, and I need to live here, I need to do all those things, I need to have a perfect wife or husband and all those things, then you set so much expectations for yourself that your mind is always like in future worrying that how do I get there, how do I get there, how do I get there. It becomes very difficult for you to focus on here and now and within yourself, to experience your divine nature, to become more peaceful. That's why I said, like, even a lot of studies show that a lot of those rural people, they're much more happier because maybe their life is more simple. I'm not um, uh, glorifying poverty, by the way. I'm just saying, if you make your life simple by understanding that ultimately happiness is something that is created by balance. After all, I wrote a book on balance, and it's all about this actually. That if you create that balance, just answering to the basic fair needs of your life, to understand that the ultimate goal is something else. It's not this temporary happiness and fleeting pleasures. So, simplicity is very important, I believe. The more things you have, the more things you need to manage, and all those things, the more complicated your mind becomes. You have more worries and so on. And then the third principle, love, which I think doesn't need a lot of explanation from my side. There's been millions of people and books written about it. That love is the like the most pleasant state of being. That when you develop love, whether it's like selfless service, thinking about the wellness of others in some way, or absorbing yourself in the thought of uh, your chosen divine God, or whatever that you call it, Jesus or God or formless God or Babaji or whatever you call it, Krishna. You engage your mind connecting to that image, to that symbol of divinity and purity and compassion, and communicating with that, communicating with your higher self, with your soul. You elevate your energy, and we talked about that the highest energy being like love and gratitude. When you develop that energy, this is the path of bhakti yoga that I was talking about, the same concept that exists in Sufism and so many other traditions, and even in Christianity. When you really absorb yourself in the thought of God through prayers and meditations and chanting and singing and so on, the effect that it has is tremendous. Really, you might meditate with this powerful Kriya Yoga technique and this and that for many years. And maybe for a few minutes, if you were really fell in love with God, with divinity, absorbed in it, it might give you more reward than do all those like body mind twisting exercises and all those things that so elaborate. I need to breathe like this, I need to chant this mantra, I need to do this and that. It's the love is literally transformative power, right? It really transforms you. And that's was his message of Haidakhan Babaji, to live in truth and simplicity and love. And if you only try to live by these three principles, I don't think you need 10 commandments and all the other complex things to tell you this is right, this is wrong, because you will really align yourself with the divine nature, and you align yourself with your spirituality and happiness as well. So I think it's a very, very powerful message that he came to give to people of this age especially. And as I said, he said many times that people need to detach from their egoistic nature and move towards their higher self, to get over the notion of mine and yours and those kind of territorial behaviors and things like that, because that is what creates suffering within and in our external environment. So I think that's a very important way I can put that notion, the thing that you mentioned.
Thank you. And I love what you mentioned about not BSing ourselves, because I think as responsible, mature adults, at some point you have to be really honest with yourself, especially as you get older. And simplicity also, that really resonated with me and what you mentioned. The one thing I want to mention before we wrap up is that, you know, that example you mentioned about going into a cave and meditating, maybe you think that's what you need, but it's really a want, even that. So if you could
Yeah.
distinguish the want and the needs, maybe you don't need to move into a cave to get where you need to get, but it's a want. And if I think we just focus on the needs, we should be able to accomplish a peaceful mind, and hence start running around seeking happiness.
Yeah, I like that. That could be also a want, or it is also. That's also an expectation in some ways. And I think that notion of becoming a monk or renouncing the war, it's really for very, very few number of people, which again, it's a kind of mystical topic to get into, but we can have the same attitude because ultimately, as I said, renunciation is a internal attitude. Because there was this story. Let's end by saying this story. I love stories. There was an ancient king in India, King Janaka, and he's very famous. And he became an ascetic in some way. He renounced the world, and he was a significant spiritual person. In his guru was Ashtavakra, which is very famous again, especially in Vedanta. And one day he was sitting in his guru's class with a bunch of other monks, and his guru was giving a discourse. They were listening. One of Janaka's, the king's soldier, runs into the class and say, "Oh, king, the palace is on fire and everything is burning." The Janaka says, "How dare you interrupt my guru's session, this sacred discourse going on? Get out of here!" And then he keeps continue listening to his guru. But a bunch of other monks that were there, they get up and they run. Everybody was like, "What happened? Where did these people go?" So after some times, they come back, and the guru, Ashtavakra, asks them, "Where did you go?" They said, "Oh, we had our, robes or socks or something. The probably worth less than $1." Especially at that time, the piece of cloth that they just wear around, like the middle part of their body, is like just so not to be naked. Oh, we had them hanging on the ropes in the courtyard of the palace, and we just went to get them so they're not get burned. And the guru said, "Oh, wow, this king is sitting here. His whole palace was on fire. He didn't bother to get up and go there to save his palace, but you had like a shitty piece of cloth there, and you were worried about that."
Hmm.
So this shows that the renunciation is an internal thing. You can be attached to something as simple as that piece of clothing, and you can also be detached from the whole your kingdom. But only very, very few people have that spiritual potential and detachment like King Janaka. So he could live as a king but not be attached to anything also. So you
Mhm.
see, just because you wear an orange robe and you sit on a place of a monk and you teach people, and people come all the time, and I see this on social media also. It's very interesting for me, very very interesting. Somebody, just because they speak very well and they have a very profound knowledge, intellectual knowledge, like millions of people are commenting, I know this guy is enlightened, I know this guy is enlightened, I think this is the greatest guru that we have right now on earth. Based on what? Because they're impressed with that guy's knowledge, nothing else really. Because they're impressed, and they don't have the knowledge, the discernment to really rank that swami guru in a different way. They think, oh, this guy must be enlightened and really advanced. But just wearing an orange robe and becoming a monk is not necessarily going to make you more spiritual. It's all internal thing. It
Yeah.
all depends on your intention and so on. Anyways, thank you so much for
Thank you.
listening. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you,
Mm.
everybody. Thank you, nature, animals, God, everybody, the homeless guy at the street, and everybody. Have a good time.